A showdown between Elon Musk and a top talk show host, Jack Nolan. What started as a routine interview quickly turned into a battle of wits, power, and control over the narrative. But here's the twist. It wasn't Musk who got cornered. It was the interviewer himself. The Empire Media Studio in New York City gleamed under the evening skyline, a sleek, glass-walled fortress of modern journalism. Inside, the stage was set for what promised to be one of the most anticipated interviews of the year. Elon Musk, the billionaire entrepreneur behind Tesla, SpaceX, and Neuralink, was about to sit down with Jack Nolan, the sharp-witted and often controversial host of The Jack Nolan Show. Known for his no-holds-barred interviews, Jack had made a career out of cornering guests, exposing their flaws, and creating viral television moments that kept millions glued to their screens. Tonight, his target was Elon Musk. The invitation had come through Musk's PR team weeks earlier, buried among countless other media requests. Most of these Musk ignored. He had long been skeptical of traditional media, often calling out journalists for bias, selective reporting, and their tendency to manipulate narratives. But the Jack Nolan Show was different. It wasn't just another corporate-friendly puff piece or hostile business takedown. It was a spectacle. A gladiator's arena, where powerful figures were either hailed as legends or exposed as frauds. His team had hesitated, warning that Jack had a habit of twisting words and ambushing guests, but Musk wasn't one to shy away from a challenge. "Set it up," he had said simply, with the cool detachment of a man who had faced rocket explosions, billion-dollar setbacks, and global scrutiny without breaking a sweat. Now, as the cameras were about to roll, the energy in the studio was electric. The audience was a mix of die-hard Musk supporters, media critics, and casual viewers eager for a showdown. The bright LED panels surrounding the stage pulsed with the show's theme music, and a low murmur of anticipation filled the room. At the center of it all was the stage, a circular setup designed for confrontation, with Jack's desk positioned directly across from the guest chair, ensuring a face-to-face battle. Backstage, Elon Musk adjusted the sleeves of his black jacket, his expression unreadable. A production assistant handed him a water bottle before disappearing into the flurry of last-minute preparations. Across the room, a large screen played clips of Jack Nolan's past interviews, flashing moments of guests squirming under tough questions, celebrities fumbling their words, and politicians trapped in carefully orchestrated exchanges. Musk barely glanced at it. He already knew what to expect. A stagehand appeared at the doorway. "5 minutes, Mr. Musk." With a nod, Musk exhaled, ran a hand through his hair, and walked toward the stage. Whatever Jack Nolan had planned, he was ready. Elon Musk stepped into the sleek, modern lobby of Empire Media Studio, his presence commanding but effortlessly casual. The studio's walls were lined with giant digital screens, broadcasting live feeds of various news channels, each competing to be the loudest voice in the media landscape. The air hummed with the faint sound of distant conversations, the shuffle of production crew members, and the unmistakable buzz of anticipation. Musk, dressed in his signature black jacket and dark jeans, took it all in with an air of quiet amusement. A young production assistant, clearly starstruck but trying to remain professional, approached him with a bottled water and a neatly printed schedule. "Mr. Musk, we're so excited to have you. You'll be mic'd up in 5 minutes." She spoke quickly, her hands fidgeting with her clipboard. Musk took the water with a polite nod but barely acknowledged the schedule. He had no intention of sticking to a script. Across the sprawling green room, a massive screen played a montage of Jack Nolan's past interviews. Musk's eyes flickered toward it, watching as high-profile CEOs, actors, and politicians were grilled, pushed into uncomfortable admissions, or left speechless. Nolan's reputation was built on moments like these, turning powerful figures into cautionary tales, exposing contradictions, forcing them into a corner. Musk's lips curled slightly. He had faced real crises. Rockets exploding mid-air, production failures, legal battles. This was just another problem to solve. A senior producer, Olivia Martinez, entered, clipboard in hand, her gaze sharp and assessing. "Mr. Musk, Jack likes to keep things spontaneous. Expect a few surprises." Musk smirked. "Surprises make life interesting." She paused, caught off guard by his calm demeanor. Most guests were visibly nervous by this point. checking their talking points or rehearsing their defenses. Musk, however, seemed as relaxed as if he were about to take a casual stroll. A stagehand appeared at the door. "We're ready for you, 3 minutes." Musk gave a final glance at the studio entrance, where the bright stage lights cast an almost surreal glow. He straightened his jacket, took a slow sip of water and, without a hint of hesitation, walked toward the stage. As Elon Musk stepped onto the brightly lit stage, the crowd erupted into a mix of cheers, murmurs, and scattered applause. The set of the Jack Nolan show was as grand as expected. A futuristic backdrop of glowing LED panels, a polished circular stage, and a minimalist yet imposing desk where Jack Nolan sat, grinning like a man who had just set a well-laid trap. The moment Musk took his seat across from him, the energy in the room shifted. Jack Nolan leaned forward, elbows resting on the desk, eyes gleaming with mischief. He had built his career on exposing flaws, putting powerful people on the defensive, and crafting moments that would go viral. With Musk, he intended to do the same. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest tonight." Nolan's voice was smooth, confident, with just the right mix of charm and condescension. The man behind Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, and a dozen other companies most of us can't even begin to understand. He turned to Musk, flashing his signature smirk. "Some call you a genius, some say you're a visionary, others, well, let's just say they think you're a little unhinged." The audience chuckled, sensing the bait. Nolan paused, waiting for a reaction. Musk barely blinked. "History will decide." His voice was even, measured, unfazed. Nolan nodded as if expecting the deflection. "Fair enough. But let's talk about something a little more interesting than history, shall we?" His tone was playful but sharp. He wasn't here to flatter Musk. He was here to rattle him. The host glanced at his stack of cue cards, then tapped one against the desk theatrically. "You've built rockets, electric cars, implanted chips in monkey brains. Some would say you're trying to play God. What do you say to that?" A few audience members laughed, waiting to see how Musk would respond. Musk chuckled, leaning back in his chair. "If I were playing God, I'd at least make sure my rockets didn't explode." The crowd erupted into laughter, caught off guard by the unexpected humor. Even Nolan, for a split second, cracked a smile. But the host wasn't done. Right, but let's be real. You've got more money than entire countries. You have millions of people hanging on to your every tweet. You control space travel, artificial intelligence, transportation, and now even social media. Doesn't that, I don't know, make you feel a little like a Bond villain? Musk tilted his head slightly, as if amused by the accusation. "If I were a Bond villain, I'd at least have a secret lair by now, but unfortunately, I still live in a $50,000 house in Texas." The audience laughed again, but Nolan's smirk sharpened. He wasn't going to let Musk charm his way through this. "Let's talk about that house, actually," Nolan said, flipping to another cue card. "Didn't you just fire most of the janitorial staff at X?" The laughter died down, the tone shifted, the real game was beginning. Jack Nolan leaned in, his smirk sharpening, sensing the moment he had been waiting for, the shift from banter to confrontation. He had toyed with Musk just enough, easing the audience in with humor, but now, it was time to push for a gotcha moment, the kind of moment that would dominate headlines and fuel viral clips. Flipping through his cue cards with deliberate slowness, he tapped one against the desk, as if unveiling a revelation. "Speaking of that house you mentioned, let's talk about something a little less amusing, shall we?" His tone was smooth, calculated. "You recently laid off a significant portion of the janitorial staff at X's headquarters. Reports say people were in tears, Elon, tears, right before the holidays." The audience murmured, sensing the sudden weight in the room. Some nodded in agreement, others sat back, watching closely. Musk didn't flinch. His expression remained calm, unreadable. Running a company isn't about keeping everyone happy, it's about keeping it alive. X was losing $4 million a day. We had to make adjustments. Nolan pounced. "Adjustments? That's an interesting way to say putting people out of work. Must be tough making those sacrifices when you own multiple private jets." A few chuckles rippled through the audience, the first signs that Nolan was steering the narrative. He had set the stage perfectly. Wealth, power, and a controversial business decision, all wrapped in a moral dilemma Musk would struggle to justify. Musk took a slow breath, tapping his fingers lightly against the armrest. Then, instead of defending himself, he flipped the question. "Jack, you run one of the highest-rated talk shows on television. How much do the production assistants behind those cameras make? Do they have full benefits? Paid leave? What happens if your ratings drop? Do they still have a job?" The audience stiffened. Nolan blinked, just for a second. He hadn't expected Musk to turn the accountability lens back on him. He chuckled, trying to recover. "Nice deflection, Elon. But we're here to talk about you." Musk tilted his head slightly, his tone light but pointed. "Are we? Or are we here to perform? Because if we're having a real conversation, let's talk about how every company makes tough decisions, including yours. Or is that off limits?" A few scattered claps erupted from the audience. Nolan's grin tightened. He was losing grip of the dominant position he had carefully built. He knew he needed to shift gears. Fast. Feigning amusement, he shuffled his cue cards. Okay, since you like flipping questions, let's move on to something people really care about." He turned to the audience. "Do we have any Tesla owners in the room?" A few hands went up and Nolan nodded, regaining control. "Interesting, because some of you trust Tesla's self-driving feature. But what about the lawsuits, the crashes? Do you ever feel responsible, Elon, when your technology fails?" The tension in the room thickened. The audience leaned in. Nolan had set another trap. Jack Nolan thought he had Musk cornered. The studio lights burned bright. The audience sat at the edge of their seats, and the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. This was his moment, the point where Musk would stumble, where the tech mogul's carefully crafted persona would crack under the weight of a well-placed attack. "Do you ever feel responsible, Elon, when your technology fails?" Nolan repeated, his voice smooth but pressing. The studio was silent. The question lingered, heavy with accusation. A lesser guest might have hesitated, stumbled, or scrambled for a rehearsed defense. But Musk? He simply tilted his head slightly, studying Nolan like a machine analyzing an input. Then, in a voice as calm as if he were discussing rocket engineering, he replied, "Do you ask the CEO of Ford if they feel responsible when someone crashes a Mustang?" The audience murmured, taken aback by the simplicity and precision of the response. Nolan, however, was unfazed. He chuckled, shaking his head. Fair, but Ford isn't promising full self-driving, you are." Musk leaned forward, resting his hands on the desk. His expression didn't change, but the air around him did. "Not yet, and neither are we. That's why it's still in beta." The mood in the studio shifted. Nolan, for the first time, wasn't in complete control. Sensing this, Nolan quickly shuffled his cue cards, scanning for his next attack. He settled on another talking point, one he was sure would throw Musk off balance. "All right, let's move on then. Neuralink, brain chips. Sounds great in theory, but what happens when hackers get in? When governments start using it for surveillance? You can't tell me you don't see the risks, Elon." Musk let the question hang in the air for a moment, his fingers tapping lightly on the table. Then, with a slight smirk, he answered, "Jack, you watch too many movies." Laughter rippled through the audience, but Musk wasn't finished. He had seen the game Nolan was playing, and now it was his turn to set the rules. "But since we're talking about control, let's talk about something real. You want to talk about the risks of technology? Fine, but let's also talk about the risks of manipulation, the kind of manipulation that happens right here on shows like this." The shift was immediate. Nolan blinked. His posture stiffened slightly, but he recovered quickly, flashing his signature smirk. "Oh? So now I'm the one in question?" Musk didn't smile. He remained perfectly still, completely in control. "You run a show that thrives on outrage. You shape narratives, decide what topics get airtime, what questions get asked, what answers get framed. The same media that scrutinizes me, who scrutinizes them?" A low murmur spread through the crowd. Nolan felt it, the shift in power, the moment slipping from his grasp. He forced a chuckle. So now you're flipping this on me? Classic deflection. Musk leaned back, crossing his arms. Not deflection, Jack. Just asking the same question you asked me. Who holds you accountable? You sit here and question whether I have too much power. Fair question. But let's be honest, you have power too. You control what millions of people see and hear. The difference is, when I make a mistake, everyone knows. When you make one, you get to edit it out. The audience erupted. Some clapping, others gasping. Nolan's grip on his cue cards tightened. For the first time in a long time, Jack Nolan wasn't just conducting an interview. He was in one. Jack Nolan could feel it, the shift. It was subtle at first, like a small crack forming in the foundation of his control. He had walked into this interview expecting to lead the conversation, to corner Musk, to put him on the defensive like he had done with countless CEOs, politicians, and celebrities before. But now, sitting under the hot studio lights, he realized something unsettling. Elon Musk wasn't playing the game, he was rewriting it. Musk sat back, composed, calculating, completely unfazed. His counterattack had landed hard, and the audience wasn't just watching anymore, they were re-evaluating. Some murmured in agreement, others nodded, intrigued, and Nolan? He was scrambling. Feigning amusement, Nolan chuckled, flipping through his cue cards as if to dismiss Musk's point. All right, Elon, you've made it clear. You think the media is the real problem. But let's not pretend you're just some guy trying to do good. His tone sharpened, an edge of irritation bleeding through the polished performance. He leaned forward. You control an entire social media platform. You dictate who gets to speak and who doesn't. You've been accused of silencing journalists, of amplifying voices that spread misinformation. You talk about power, well, you have it. So let's ask again, who holds you accountable? The audience stilled. This was Nolan's attempt to regain control, to put Musk back in the hot seat. Musk, however, didn't blink. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, as if considering something amusing. Then, with absolute composure, he replied, "The difference, Jack, is that when I make a decision, everyone sees it. When I make a mistake, people know immediately. When the media manipulates a narrative, who calls you out?" Nolan's jaw tensed ever so slightly. Musk continued, his voice measured but firm. You sit here portraying yourself as the watchdog of the powerful, but let's be real, your network has corporate sponsors. Your show survives on advertising dollars from some of the very industries you claim to hold accountable. You say I have unchecked power? At least I don't hide where mine comes from. Can you say the same? The audience reacted. Louder this time, a wave of claps and murmurs filled the studio. Some looked at Nolan, waiting to see how he would respond. But Nolan wasn't sure how to. His grip on the desk tightened slightly. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. He was the one who baited, who controlled the tempo, who dictated the flow of conversation. But now, Musk had flipped the entire dynamic. Nolan tried to regain his footing, forcing a smirk. So now this is an interview about me? About the media? I thought you wanted to talk about the future, about innovation. Musk leaned forward just slightly. I do. But part of the future is recognizing who actually controls information. And Jack, let's be honest, you don't challenge power, you are power. You don't expose systems, you are the system. And the second you push too hard in the wrong direction, the people who sign your paycheck will remind you who's really in charge. The audience erupted. A mix of gasps, applause, and even a few cheers rippled through the room. For the first time, Nolan wasn't the one asking the hard questions. His smile flickered, the confidence in his eyes dimming just slightly. This wasn't an interview anymore. It was a reckoning. The moment Elon Musk turned the tables on Jack Nolan, the world took notice. Within minutes, clips from the interview began circulating online, flooding social media with captions like, "Musk destroys media narrative," "Elon exposes talk show host," and "Who really holds the power?" The hashtag #MuskVsMedia started trending worldwide, with millions of users dissecting the exchange in real time. News outlets rushed to cover the moment, some framing it as a brilliant takedown of media hypocrisy, while others attempted to paint Musk's responses as evasions of real accountability. Twitter, or rather X, exploded. Pro-Musk supporters hailed the moment as a victory for free speech, with tweets reading, "Elon Musk just did what every CEO and politician should do, call out the media's selective outrage." Jack Nolan thought he could corner Musk. Instead, he got schooled on his own show. This isn't just about Elon, it's about how the media frames every conversation to fit a narrative. But the reactions weren't all in Musk's favor. Critics accused him of dodging tough questions and using deflection tactics to avoid responsibility for Tesla layoffs, Neuralink risks, and X's content moderation controversies. Some high-profile journalists weighed in, arguing that Musk had simply outperformed Nolan in media optics, not in substance. Meanwhile, YouTube and TikTok became hotbeds of analysis. Influencers and political commentators broke down the power shift in real time, pausing the interview at key moments to point out when Nolan lost control and Musk seized the upper hand. Reaction videos flooded in, some praising Musk's handling of the confrontation, others defending Nolan and insisting the interview had been taken out of context. At Empire Media Studios, the impact was immediate and chaotic. Nolan's producers scrambled behind the scenes, some suggesting damage control strategies, while others argued that leaning into the controversy might boost ratings. Olivia Martinez, Nolan's executive producer, pulled him aside. "This is going viral in all the wrong ways, Jack. We need a response. Now." Nolan, still shaken from the interview, ran a hand through his hair. He had never lost control of a conversation like that before. He had built his reputation on controlling narratives, shaping public perception, making the powerful squirm. But now, he was the story. Across the city, Musk sat in the back of a Tesla, scrolling through the reactions on his phone. His mentions were exploding. The engagement metrics on X were through the roof, and his latest cryptic tweet, "When you see the strings, you stop watching the puppet show," had already been retweeted hundreds of thousands of times. It was clear this wasn't just another viral moment, this was a shift, a crack in the way media controlled narratives, and once people saw the cracks, they didn't stop looking for more. Back at Empire Media Studios, the fallout from the interview was immediate and chaotic. Jack Nolan's dressing room door slammed shut behind him, the noise echoing down the hall. His normally confident posture was gone, replaced by tightened shoulders and a clenched jaw. He ripped off his earpiece and tossed it onto the table, his fingers pressing against his temples as he tried to process what had just happened. Outside, his executive producer, Olivia Martinez, was already on the phone with network executives. "We need to spin this, and fast," she said, pacing the hallway. The network's public relations team had already issued an internal memo warning that the interview had taken an unexpected turn and that a response was necessary to control the media narrative. But there was no easy way to fix this. Musk's words weren't just making headlines, they were shaping public perception. Inside the room, Nolan ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. He had faced tough interviews before, had even stirred controversy himself, but never had he lost control of a conversation so completely. His phone buzzed incessantly, messages from his staff, network higher-ups, journalists wanting a comment. Social media was ablaze with split reactions. Some people mocked him for getting outmaneuvered, while others sympathized, arguing that Musk had skillfully dodged accountability. Nolan knew what he needed to do: get ahead of the story, flip the narrative before it consumed him. "We need a follow-up statement, something strong, something that reframes the conversation," he said, looking up at Olivia, who was still on the phone. "We push the idea that Musk dodged real questions, that he performed for his audience, not ours." Olivia sighed, rubbing her temple. "Jack, it's already out of our hands. This isn't just about you and Musk anymore. It's about people questioning how media works." Meanwhile, across town, Elon Musk was completely unfazed. Sitting in the back of his Tesla, he scrolled through X, watching as engagement numbers skyrocketed. His latest tweet had already been retweeted over 1 million times, and the clip of the moment he turned the tables on Nolan was now the #1 trending video across platforms. Musk smirked, sipping his coffee. He had seen this play out before. A traditional media figure tried to control the conversation, only for the internet to decide otherwise. He knew that by the time morning came, talk show hosts, news anchors, and YouTubers alike would all be dissecting the interview, arguing over who really won. But the truth was, it didn't matter, because Jack Nolan wasn't the story anymore. The story was about something much bigger. Who really controls the truth? And now, the world was asking the question. By the next morning, the interview had become more than just a viral moment. It had evolved into a cultural event. News outlets, podcasts, and social media analysts were breaking down every second of the exchange, debating whether Elon Musk had exposed media manipulation or simply outmaneuvered Jack Nolan in a battle of rhetoric. Some mainstream journalists rushed to Nolan's defense, framing the interview as an example of a billionaire dodging real scrutiny. Editorials popped up with headlines like, "Did Musk really win, or did he just distract?" and "The danger of billionaire-owned media." Nolan himself made a calculated move, releasing a follow-up statement, insisting that his goal had always been to ask tough questions and hold the powerful accountable, a statement that divided public opinion even further. But the damage had already been done. The audience wasn't just talking about Musk, they were questioning the very mechanics of modern media. A growing number of people weren't siding with Musk or Nolan, they were siding against the system itself. Online discussions shifted beyond the interview, raising bigger questions. Who decides what's newsworthy? How much of the media is controlled by corporate interests? Are mainstream journalists really watchdogs, or just entertainers shaping narratives? Meanwhile, Musk kept the conversation alive with a single cryptic tweet. When people stop trusting the illusion, they start seeing the strings. It was retweeted over 2 million times. At Empire Media Studios, the mood was uneasy. The executives weren't angry, at least not yet. If anything, ratings had skyrocketed. The network had been handed its biggest audience numbers in years, but Nolan's credibility had taken a hit. He had always controlled the narrative. Until now. As for Musk, he had walked into the interview expecting an attack and walked out having changed the conversation entirely. He didn't need to win debates outright. He didn't need to prove anything to Jack Nolan or the media. He just needed to plant the seed of doubt. And now that seed was growing. The story of Elon Musk's interview with Jack Nolan isn't just about a billionaire clashing with the media. It's about how narratives are shaped, controlled, and sometimes exposed. The key lesson from this exchange is the power of perception and who truly controls information. For years, mainstream media has positioned itself as the gatekeeper of truth, deciding which stories are told and how they are framed. Jack Nolan, a seasoned interviewer, thrived on shaping narratives and putting his guests on the defensive. But Musk, rather than playing by those rules, flipped the script. Instead of reacting emotionally or defensively, he questioned the very system that Nolan operated in, forcing the audience to reconsider their trust in traditional media. The lesson is clear. In today's digital age, control over the narrative is no longer absolute. Social media has decentralized the flow of information, making it possible for alternative perspectives to challenge mainstream voices. People are now more skeptical of media framing and more willing to question who benefits from a particular story being told in a certain way. Ultimately, this interview serves as a reminder that critical thinking is crucial. Never accept a narrative at face value without asking, who is really in control?